Hi guys, you're welcome to the channel. This is Uglo Fashion and thank you so much for stopping by. For today's tutorial, I'll be showing you how to draft, cut and sew this trending kimono cowl drape gown with front slits. In order to explain this style well, I sketch it out, and whenever you are cutting your style, you check how many parts it is being divided into. So this will help you to know how to allocate your measurement. For this style, we have the kimono part, which is the upper bodies. We have the band and also the skirt part, which is the drape part of the style. So the first part that I'll be cutting is the skirt part because it's going to consume more fabric and it's more technical than every other part. So to cut the skirt part, you first subtract your full length from your half length. Sorry, you subtract your half length from your full length, and the full length I worked with is 56 minus half length of 17 inches. So I have 39 inches left there. So this is the skirt measurement. On my pattern paper, I marked 39 inches for the length, and from the waist, I measured 8 inches for the hip and 19 inches for the nail length. So the next thing is to mark our horizontal measurement, and the horizontal measurement for my waist is 30 inches divided by 4. For hip, 40 divided by 4, that's 10 inches. So at the knee length, I subtracted 1 inch from my cutter measurement of the hip. My cutter measurement of hip is 10 inches minus 1 inch, that's 9 inch. That will give it a slant shape there. Then at the hem, I used my waist measurement, which is 7.5 inches. The reason is because of the shape of that skirt. It's very curvy, it's very bent, so you can use as low as 6 inches, or you can maintain your waist measurement anyhow you like. Then I connected the lines and proceed to cut it out. So after cutting, I place that aside and I mark the back borders. So for the back, I added 1.5 inch zipper allowance, and I placed the front pattern directly after the zipper allowance and I cut it out. So you can see this is the zipper, which is the back, and this is the front. I've labeled each accordingly. So the next thing is to carve out the shape we have at the front. So I place the back separately, and for the shape, I picked the front pattern. This is the center. So I marked 2 inches after the knee length, directly after the knee length. It depends on where you want the slit to end. So I want mine to end directly 2 inches directly after the knee length. And at the hem, I marked 1 inch and used my curve ruler to bend it out well to give it a nice shape. So having done with that, the next thing is to pick the front and the back pattern together, and I tape the two at the hem and also at the hip side because I'm going to cut them together. You know, there is no joining at the side, so both has to be joined together. Next, I began to mark 1.5 inch for the drape. You can use any figure for your drape, depends on how much drape you want on your skirt. So whatever you mark at the front, you have to mark it at the back as well. You have to maintain the same figure at the back. And at the hip side, because I'll be connecting the lines I have at the waistline together with the hip, so for the drape, I marked 1 inch. You can actually use more than 1 inch. It depends on where you want the drape to end. So I've gone ahead to label them. You see, I did not label the front, I only labeled the back. The reason is because the pattern paper is different from each other, so this will help me know which is front and which is back. Next, I placed another pattern paper on the table and I marked the midpoint of that pattern paper. So I placed the front pattern and the back pattern directly on the line at the hem. And at the hip side, I ensured that the distance between the two are the same. Like I marked 2.5 inches for the back and also 2.5 inches for the front. Then I added to the pattern paper. Next, I proceed to mark at the center front 3 inches upward at the waistline. Then I place the pattern of the drape accordingly on the 3 inches, and I did the same to the back also. Then at the hip side, I marked 1.5 inch distance between the drape. So this is how much I want it to fall. up to. Then I began to mark everything round. Then I added additional allowance. This is just to help me fold it well. If I don't cut out that paper, it will not be easy for me to fold. So after folding, I began to cut. You can use your tracing wheel instead of going through this process, but I don't have tracing wheel. That's why I decided to do it this way. Then I cut out the pattern. Here is the pattern on my fabric. I added ½ inch to the sides and also waistline and the hem. But please, if you're adding allowance to your center front, please add more than ½ inch. You needed like 1.5 inch there, so that you don't go through this process that I went through. You don't need additional facing. All you need is just to interlock the allowance and stitch on it like you see me do. Next, I place the facing and I stitch it on the allowance I left at the center. I first pinned it around, then proceed to the machine to stitch. So after stitching, I interlock the facing and use hemming gum to hold it down. You can see I've already interlocked it. So you can do this to your allowance if you don't have any facing. Then you proceed to hem it down. And at the hem also, at the length of the skirt, I also interlock. So this is how I will fold and just add the hemming gum. So we are done with the front piece, the center rather. The next is to drape. And for this drape, you can see the shape of the skirt. So you just follow the shape. You know it's 4 pleats that you have on both sides, at the front and at the back. So you just pleat it accordingly. You can see the way I pleated mine. Then you proceed to the machine. After securing it with pin, proceed to the machine to stitch. Next is the kimono. But to cut the kimono, I'll be using 2 inches for the band. So I subtracted the 2 inches from my half length because the skirt started directly after the half length. So I subtracted 2 inches for the band. So 17 minus 2 inches, my waist measurement is 17. 17 minus 2 inches will give me 15 inches. So I marked 15 inches for the kimono, but I added 1 inch extra. That's because I want it to fall off well. So, and at the shoulder, you measure from the midpoint of your back neckline down to your desired sleeve length. So my own desired sleeve length is 20 inches. That is from the midpoint of my back down to my desired sleeve length. The sleeve length is 20 inches. So that's the shoulder. And from that point, I marked 3.5 inches for the width of the neckline. And for the depth of the neckline, I used 6 inches. This is optional. It depends on your preference. Next, I mark 1.5 inch at the shoulder to connect to the neckline. This is shoulder slope. And after the shoulder slope, I mark the circumference of my sleeve, which is 11 inches. I divided it by 2, then I added extra 1.5 inch allowance. This is optional also. You can add, it depends on how wide you want the sleeve to be. Next is the gathered part at the waistline, and this you can do it in different ways. You can divide your waistline into 4. Whatever you have, you can add like 5 inches, 4 inches. This will help you to see what to pleat out. Or you can just subtract from the measurement you have at the shoulder, that is the 20 inches. You can just subtract like, let's say 3 inches from it. It depends on how wide you actually want it to be. You can do it in these 2 different ways. Either you cut your measurement and add like 5 inches or 6 inches allowance, or you just subtract few inches from the shoulder measurement. Next, I connected the 2 together this way. I connected it back to the sleeve length, and this is what we have at the end of everything. So this is the front, and I proceed to cut it out. And I also placed the pattern on my fabric to cut the back because they are going to be the same. The only difference is just the zipper allowance and the neck depth. So I used 1.5 inch for the zipper allowance, and I added necessary allowances to the sides. I added half to the side, half to the hem, and also half to the shoulder side. Next, I proceed to cut the facing. for the neckline. And I also interlock the facing, and after stitching it to the neckline of the kimono, I proceed to hem it with my hemming gum. You know, there's no stitch showing on this style, so all you do is just to hem and hem. So I hemmed it down. This is the front piece. And for the back, before I hem the back down, after stitching the facing, I proceed to place the four on each other, that is the facing and the main fabric this way. Then I proceed to the machine to stitch everything together. Now we are done with the kimono. Next is to stitch the kimono and the band together. So like I said, I used 2 inches for the band, but I added extra allowances. I added ½ inch to the part that will be joined to the kimono and ½ inch to the part that will be joined to the skirt. You know, it's the one connecting both the skirt and the kimono together, so which makes it 3 inches in total. And I notched the midpoint of the band also. So I cut facing alongside with the band, which makes the front piece 2 and also the back 4 with the facing. So now the next thing is I notched the midpoint of the kimono as well. So I'll just gather the kimono on this band. Sorry, I added to the allowance of the band at the side. I added like 1 inch on both sides. That's because I'll be stitching the seam allowance, so I use the 1 inch on both sides for seam allowance. After stitching it to the kimono, I proceed to place my facing this way on the band and I pinned it down, then proceed to the machine to stitch. I did the same for the back as well. So this is our kimono with the band on the table. Next is to place the skirt on it. So I notch the midpoint of the skirt as well and pin it to the band. Then proceed to stitch and also fix the zipper. So thank you very much for watching this tutorial to the end. Bye.